October 1945, Camp McCoy, Wisconsin. Private Takeshi Yamamoto's leg had stopped throbbing 3 days prior, a silence more unnerving than any pain. The grenade fragment wound, festering since Okinawa's final chaotic days, now resembled spoiled meat. When American soldiers surrounded his foxhole near Hill 89, Takeshi pressed his forehead to the coral rock, anticipating a bullet. Instead, rough hands pulled him up, checked him for weapons, and moved on. No execution, no bayonet, just an indifferent efficiency more unsettling than hatred. The 17-day journey across the Pacific on the USS General M.C. Meigs was spent mostly below deck in a cargo hold with 200 other prisoners. The air was thick with the scent of unwashed bodies and the sharp tang of disinfectant, which the Americans sprayed twice daily. Takeshi's thigh wound seeped through a crude bandage fashioned from a torn undershirt. An American Navy corpsman had merely noted it during processing in Zamami Island. Takeshi expected no more. In the Imperial Army, minor wounds meant a return to duty, while serious ones often led to a quiet death. Rumors circulated among the prisoners during the crossing. America destroyed by kamikazes, the Emperor victorious, the transport ship heading to Californian execution grounds. Sergeant Hiroshi Tanaka from Takeshi's regiment insisted American soldiers beat prisoners and fed them garbage, a claim he'd heard from a Korean laborer. Takeshi remained silent, his legs' sweet, nauseating rot consuming his thoughts. As the train rolled through the American countryside toward Wisconsin, Takeshi pressed his face to the window. Intact farmhouses, green and gold fields untouched by fire, grazing cattle, and waving children contradicted all propaganda. No bomb craters, no burned cities, just endless prosperous land. The cognitive dissonance was more painful than any fever. Camp McCoy's gates opened on October 12, 1945. Takeshi barely registered the processing, the delousing shower, the clean, 2 sizes too large POW uniform. Guards herded them to Compound 7 for Japanese enlisted men. The barracks were wooden structures with real bunks, thin mattresses, and wool blankets. No mud floors, no insects. Takeshi collapsed onto his bunk, watching the autumn light filter through actual glass windows. 3 hours later, an American medic arrived, his clean white armband with a red cross glowing against his olive-drab uniform. He seemed no older than 22, with sandy hair and pale skin. Moving through the barracks with mechanical efficiency, he stopped at Takeshi's bunk, his nose wrinkling slightly. Through Corporal James Nakamura, a Nisei interpreter from Los Angeles, the medic inquired about the smell. Takeshi gestured to his leg. The medic knelt without asking permission, devoid of the contempt Takeshi expected from a victor. His hands gently peeled back the filthy bandage, fused with infected flesh. Takeshi bit his lip until he tasted copper. The wound was worse than he'd imagined. A 3-inch gash across his outer thigh, the surrounding tissue greenish-black with infection. The medic's face remained neutral, professional. He spoke to Nakamura, who translated, "You're going to the hospital, now." Takeshi's English was limited, but he understood hospital and knew it couldn't mean what the translator said. Hospitals were for officers, for the valuable wounded. Enlisted men endured or died in barracks. He'd seen it, men with dysentery left in corners, shrapnel-wounded men wrapped in rags. Medical supplies were precious. Why waste them on enemy prisoners? 2 soldiers arrived with a canvas stretcher. They lifted Takeshi with practiced ease, ignoring his weak protest. Through the window, Tanaka watched, his eyes hollow, perhaps fearing a new American method of disposal. The stretcher-bearers carried Takeshi across the compound, past bored guards in watchtowers, past barracks where hundreds of Japanese faces pressed against windows. The camp hospital, a separate building, was larger than any medical facility Takeshi had seen in the Imperial Army. White paint gleamed in the afternoon sun. Inside, it smelled of ether and soap, not blood and gangrene. Electric lights blazed, making Takeshi squint. An American doctor, a captain with graying temples and wire-rimmed spectacles, examined the wound while Nakamura translated in low tones. The doctor's clinical assessment: infection had spread into the muscle. Without treatment, sepsis would develop within days. With treatment, he chose his words carefully, the leg could be saved. He ordered penicillin, sulfur drugs, surgical debridement. Takeshi recognized none of these terms. In Japan, infection meant death or amputation. In the Imperial Army, the same but faster. They placed Takeshi in a real hospital bed with clean white sheets smelling of bleach and starch. An American nurse, with kind eyes and efficient movements, started an intravenous line. The needle pinched, but she worked quickly, taping the tube. She spoke reassuringly in English, smiled and moved on. Takeshi stared at the IV bag, clear fluid dripping with metronomic precision. He'd never seen such equipment used for an enlisted prisoner. The surgical ward smelled of iodine. Ether through a mask plunged Takeshi into chemical darkness. He expected to wake without his leg, if he woke at all. When consciousness returned, the leg was attached, heavily bandaged, throbbing with a clean pain, unlike the infection's dull rot. The doctor had removed dead tissue, flushed the wound, and closed it with neat sutures. Takeshi counted 13 stitches when they changed the dressing the next morning. Penicillin injections came every 4 hours, administered by rotating nurses. The American medical staff treated Japanese prisoners with the same efficiency as their own soldiers. No special cruelty or kindness, just professional competence, which Takeshi found more disorienting than either extreme. They monitored his temperature, wound for infection, and adjusted medication. The hospital ward held 30 beds, 20 occupied by Japanese prisoners with various ailments: pneumonia, untreated Okinawa wounds, malnutrition, tropical diseases. American doctors treated them all. An army dentist arrived twice weekly, addressing years of untreated dental problems. Takeshi watched a private from Kyushu undergo 2 hours of surgery for shattered teeth from artillery blast. The dentist used Novocaine, worked carefully, providing gauze and pain medication. On the 3rd day, Takeshi's fever broke. The wound's angry red faded to pink. The doctor examined it, made satisfied notes, and reduced penicillin to twice daily. Through Nakamura, he explained the healing process, wound care, and complication signs, speaking as if Takeshi's recovery mattered, as if an enemy soldier's leg was worth American medicine and time. The cognitive dissonance became unbearable. Every interaction contradicted Imperial Army teachings. Americans were brutal, wasteful, decadent, meant to torture. Instead, nurses changed his bedding daily. Orderlies brought 3 soft meals. The ward remained heated against Wisconsin's October cold. At night, unable to sleep, Takeshi heard American guards quietly playing cards in the hallway, their laughter subdued but genuine. Sergeant Tanaka visited during prisoner hours, his eyes reflecting confused hostility, unable to reconcile the medical care with their shared propaganda. "They're trying to trick us," he muttered in Japanese, too low for guards to hear, "making us soft before the real torture begins." But Takeshi no longer believed it. The IV fluid, penicillin, clean sheets, surgical skill, the doctor's professional concern, all real. On Okinawa, Takeshi had seen men die from smaller wounds, medics prioritizing officers or those who could return to combat. The Americans used their supplies, doctors, and expensive medications to save an ordinary enemy, private who would never fight again. The realization spread slowly, like penicillin through his bloodstream, killing the infection of lies he'd been fed. If Americans lied about this, treating enemy prisoners with modern medicine and dignity, what else was a lie? Stories of American cruelty? Claims of weakness? The entire justification for Japan's war? On the 7th day, the doctor declared the infection controlled. Takeshi could return to the barracks within another week once the wound closed. Physical therapy would restore leg use. Crutches would assist him until then. The doctor shook his hand, an enemy prisoner's hand, and moved on. Takeshi sat in his hospital bed that night, watching the first snow he'd ever seen fall outside. Despite Wisconsin's October cold, the ward radiators kept him comfortable. Somewhere in Japan, his mother, if her village still existed, likely prepared dinner with scarce ingredients. If she knew American doctors had saved her son's leg with medicines Japan couldn't manufacture, what would she think? He touched the clean bandage, feeling the neat sutures. In 3 to 4 weeks, he would walk normally. He would eat 3 meals daily in the mess hall, described by other prisoners with bewildered disbelief. He would attend English classes, participate in recreation, receive mail. He would survive this war he expected to die fighting, survive because the enemy he was taught to hate treated his infected wound with more care than his own army ever had. Propaganda had prepared Takeshi for death, torture, everything but this: systematic competence, professional medicine, and the bewildering mercy of an enemy who valued his defeated life enough to save it. On December 4th, 1945, at Camp McCoy, Takeshi witnessed a profound shift in the treatment of Japanese prisoners of war. Corporal Hiroshi Nakamura, returning from the dental clinic, displayed not pain but astonishment. A gleaming silver filling now replaced a rotted molar that had tormented him for 8 months. In the Imperial Army, such suffering was to be endured as a mark of warrior spirit. Here, an American dentist, Captain Morrison, spent 40 minutes administering anesthesia, drilling and filling the cavity, a procedure that cost Hiroshi nothing. Takeshi learned that comprehensive dental care was a standard medical practice under the Geneva Convention, not a reward. Sergeant Tanaka noted that 3 men from his former unit received extensive dental reconstructions, including bridges and crowns, luxuries that would have been unaffordable in pre-war Tokyo. The Americans treated dental issues like any other medical problem, requiring immediate professional attention. The subsequent week, Takeshi underwent a routine physical examination. Part of the camp's monthly health screenings, he weighed 72 kilograms, an increase of 18 kilograms since his arrival in September. The medic, Private Henderson, recorded the weight without particular reaction, as if significant weight gain among Japanese prisoners was commonplace. A vision test revealed Takeshi's need for corrective lenses for moderate myopia. Within 2 weeks, he received wire-framed glasses from the camp's optical facility. The newfound clarity was startling. He could now read distant signs, discern individual faces, and appreciate the details of the Wisconsin landscape beyond the fences. Such optical precision had been a luxury for only officers and the wealthy in Japan. Here, the glasses were issued as a standard medical supply, catalogued with the same bureaucratic indifference as his boot size. The camp's recreation program ran every evening from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. Initially, Takeshi resisted participation, deeming sports and games beneath the dignity of an imperial soldier, even a captured one. However, boredom and curiosity drew him to the gymnasium on December 18th. Inside, he found basketball courts with polished floors, volleyball nets, and modern, well-maintained exercise equipment. Japanese POWs played against each other, sometimes joined by American guards who laughed and sweated alongside them. Sergeant Olson, a tall guard from Minnesota, taught several Japanese men the rules of American football, using a genuine leather ball and patient hand gestures for instruction. The surreal nature of the scene struck Takeshi forcefully. Just 6 months prior, these men would have sought to kill one another. Now, they ran practice drills in a comfortably heated gymnasium while snow fell outside. The camp library operated 3 afternoons weekly, managed by Mrs. Patricia Hoffman, a civilian volunteer from Sparta, Wisconsin. She arrived in a dark blue Chevrolet, bringing boxes of donated books. The library, housed in 2 barracks buildings, contained approximately 4,000 volumes, including Japanese language books acquired through Red Cross channels and Buddhist texts requested by prisoners. Takeshi began attending on Tuesdays and Thursdays, primarily to read the Japanese newspapers. Though weeks old, they offered news from home, devastating accounts of Tokyo's destruction, Hiroshima and Nagasaki's obliteration by unimaginable weapons, millions left homeless, and impending famine. He absorbed these reports while in a warm library, full from lunch, wearing clean clothes and new glasses. Mrs. Hoffman noticed his interest in English materials and offered to teach him. She provided elementary textbooks and dedicated hours during each visit to instruct any prisoner willing to learn basic English. Takeshi learned that she had lost a son at Guadalcanal in 1942. When questioned by a prisoner about her volunteer work with Japanese soldiers, she simply stated that the war was over and young men needed education to rebuild their lives, her words devoid of bitterness or vengefulness. The work program began in January 1946, once Takeshi's leg healed enough for light duties. Camp McCoy assigned prisoners to various labor details, paying 80 cents per day in scrip, redeemable at the camp canteen. Takeshi joined a group working at the nearby Muller family dairy farm. The 200-acre farm, with 80 Holstein cows, boasted agricultural technology Takeshi had only seen in pictures of American abundance: electric milking machines, mechanized hay balers, and a powerful tractor. The German-American Mullers treated the Japanese work detail with professional neutrality, providing hot coffee in ceramic mugs during breaks, and Mrs. Muller's substantial sandwiches, ham or roast beef with cheese and vegetables, for lunch. Young Frederick Mueller, 16, asked Takeshi about Japan with genuine curiosity, inquiring about farming methods, family structures, and whether he had seen Mount Fuji, seemingly unconcerned that Takeshi had spent 3 years trying to kill Americans. The camp canteen functioned like a small department store, offering goods that seemed incongruous given the war's recent end. Takeshi spent his first wages on Camel cigarettes, priced at 15 cents a pack, cheaper than Japanese cigarettes pre-war. He bought chocolate bars for 5 cents each and ivory soap for 8 cents. After several weeks, he saved enough scrip for a fountain pen and writing paper, intending to write home despite unreliable mail service to Japan. The canteen also sold work gloves, sewing kits, harmonicas, playing cards, magazines, and pocket knives. Other prisoners purchased large quantities of Coca-Cola, which arrived in wooden cases and sold for 5 cents a bottle. Takeshi found the drink aggressively sweet but refreshing. Its carbonation struck him as decadent, a symbol of American excess. Despite this, the canteen restocked Coke 3 times weekly due to high demand. Sunday mornings were for Christian church services, led by military chaplains and civilian ministers. However, the camp also accommodated Buddhist practices. Sergeant Tanaka led a group of prisoners in transforming a storage room into a makeshift temple, furnished with a small altar and incense from Red Cross packages. The camp administration permitted these observances without interference, a tolerance that troubled Takeshi more than overt hostility would have. State Shinto teachings had propagated the idea of American hatred for Japanese religion and culture, their desire to destroy everything Japanese. Yet here, American guards respectfully acknowledged the Buddhist altar. Chaplain Williams, a Methodist minister from Milwaukee, engaged in theological discussions with interested prisoners through an interpreter, asking about Buddhist philosophy with scholarly interest rather than missionary zeal. These conversations perplexed Takeshi. Where was the cultural annihilation he had been promised? Where was the forced conversion and erasure of Japanese identity? Mail from Japan arrived sporadically via Red Cross channels. Takeshi received a letter from his mother in Yokohama, dated October 1945. The thin paper and shaky handwriting described conditions that made his comfortable captivity seem obscene. Their neighborhood had been entirely destroyed by American bombing raids in May. His father died in the fires, and his younger sister suffered severe burns. They lived in a shack made of scavenged materials, surviving on approximately 1,100 calories daily, barely enough to prevent starvation. His mother's letter implored him to survive, endure hardships, and return home. She wrote, unaware that her son ate 3 full meals daily, received professional medical care, earned wages, and slept in heated barracks. The disorienting contrast between her reality and his filled Takeshi with a shame more profound than that of his capture. Evening discussions among prisoners at Camp McCoy revealed the profound ideological collapse within. Corporal Nakamura vehemently argued that militarist teachings were lies designed to perpetuate a pointless war. Private Ichiro Suzuki countered that accepting American kindness betrayed those who died for Japanese victory. Sergeant Tanaka, more pragmatic, suggested that survival and adaptation were necessities, not betrayals. These nightly debates in the barracks grew more intense as prisoners received letters from a devastated Japan while living in relative comfort. Some older veterans refused to participate in recreation or work, rigidly adhering to military protocol. Younger conscripts like Takeshi found such resistance increasingly futile. The overwhelming evidence before their eyes contradicted years of propaganda. Americans were neither devils nor saints, merely people operating within a system that valued individual lives, even enemy lives, a seriousness Japanese military culture had explicitly rejected. In February 1946, Takeshi wrote a response to his mother, struggling with how much truth to disclose. He honestly described his medical care, knowing she would be relieved his leg had healed. He mentioned the work program but downplayed the wages and abundance. He omitted details about the gymnasium, library, Mrs. Hoffman's English lessons, or the dairy farm, fearing they would seem a cruel fantasy to someone in a Tokyo shantytown. Instead, he inquired about his sister's recovery, other family members, and promised to return once repatriation began. He posted the letter at the camp mail facility, where a corporal checked for security violations but otherwise processed correspondence without reading it, another instance of American protocol contradicting expected behavior. News of repatriation scheduled for spring via military transport ships arrived in February. This announcement provoked mixed reactions at Camp McCoy. Some prisoners celebrated, eager to reunite with families and contribute to reconstruction. Others felt anxious about returning to a destroyed country with scarce food, uncertain employment, and potential stigma for former soldiers. Several men, including Corporal Nakamura, seriously considered the possibility of remaining in America if permitted. Nakamura openly expressed his admiration for American industrial capacity, agricultural abundance, and social systems that did not demand citizens die for abstract concepts. He faced harsh criticism from traditionalists who accused him of abandoning his heritage. These arguments became heated but never violent, partly due to camp regulations and largely because everyone recognized the war's conclusion rendered such disputes academic. Japan had lost completely. America had won completely. This reality was constantly reinforced by their heated barracks, full stomachs, professional medical care, and well-stocked canteens. Takeshi's final medical checkup took place in March 1946, prior to repatriation processing. Captain Henderson, the chief medical officer, examined Takeshi's leg, declaring it fully healed. Henderson noted matter-of-factly that without antibiotic treatment and surgery, amputation, or even death from systemic infection would have been likely. He explained these procedures were standard care, marking Takeshi's file. Takeshi thanked him in careful English he'd learned from Mrs. Hoffman. Henderson nodded, already calling for the next prisoner. The 4-minute interaction confirmed that American medicine had saved Takeshi's life as a routine administrative matter, moving on to the next patient without ceremony or expectation of gratitude beyond common courtesy. September 1946, Yokohama, Japan. Private Takeshi Yamamoto arrived in the devastated port of Yokohama on the SS Marine Phoenix, one of over 2,000 repatriated Japanese prisoners of war, all facing an uncertain future. His 3-week voyage from San Francisco ended in a city ravaged by the May 1945 firebombing, 70% destroyed. The landscape was one of skeletal buildings, ash and makeshift shanties housing displaced civilians. Takeshi's journey home began on August 15, 1945, at Camp McCoy, Wisconsin. He was undergoing physical therapy for a leg injury sustained on Saipan when news of Emperor Hirohito's surrender crackled over the camp loudspeaker. The American nurse, Lieutenant Martha Henderson, paused, a mix of relief and sadness on her face. Other Japanese prisoners reacted with stunned silence, tears, or disbelief. The medical staff, however, continued their rounds, embodying a professionalism that had defined their care irrespective of the war's outcome. Repatriation wasn't immediate. Hundreds of thousands of prisoners across America needed transport. Camp McCoy transitioned into a holding facility. Takeshi utilized this waiting period to complete his physical rehabilitation and enroll in vocational training. He learned basic automotive mechanics from patient American instructors who treated them as students, not enemies. English terms like spark plug and carburetor proved more valuable than his military training. Takeshi departed Camp McCoy in June 1946. Colonel Robert Wagner, the camp commander, wished the prisoners well in rebuilding Japan. Guards shook hands with their former charges, a gesture unimaginable in 1944. Some prisoners carried letters and photos from American families they had worked for on farms. His cross-country train journey to San Francisco revealed an America untouched by war. Bustling factories and free movement contrasted sharply with the deprivation awaiting him in Japan. This stark difference gnawed at him during the Pacific crossing. Upon disembarking in Yokohama, Takeshi encountered chaos. Japanese officials, overwhelmed and under-resourced, struggled to process the returning POWs. Medical screenings were cursory, a stark contrast to the thorough care at McCoy. The Japanese Red Cross, newly reconstituted, offered aid, but its resources were meager compared to the American military medical infrastructure Takeshi had experienced. He saw men who had lost limbs or suffered from malnutrition due to inadequate care in other camps, recognizing his own healed leg as a testament to his good fortune. His journey to his home village in Shikoku took another week, navigating damaged rail lines with sporadic service. Though spared intense firebombing, his prefecture bore the scars of wartime deprivation and economic collapse. Food rationing was severe, and the black market thrived. American occupation forces, stationed mainly in cities, were implementing demilitarization and war crimes trials, fostering an atmosphere of uncertainty. Takeshi's family reunion was bittersweet. His father had died in 1944 on a transport ship attacked by an American submarine, and his younger brother had perished in Okinawa. His mother and 2 sisters had survived, subsisting on meager rations. When he showed them the technical manuals from Camp McCoy and demonstrated his English, his mother wept, not from joy, but from the realization that the enemy had provided her son with care and education while their own government had led his brothers to pointless deaths. Takeshi kept details of his medical treatment, abundant food, and American kindness private. In post-war Japan, such admissions could be seen as disloyalty. He understood this and largely reserved his experiences for immediate family. His technical skills, however, were undeniable and immediately valuable. By early 1947, as American occupation authorities initiated economic reconstruction, Takeshi found employment with Shikoku Transport Company, a fledgling firm attempting to rebuild Japan's shattered logistics infrastructure with aging trucks and buses. His mechanical knowledge, acquired at Camp McCoy, allowed him to repair vehicles deemed hopeless by others. His English, enabling him to read American technical manuals for replacement parts, was crucial. Within 2 years, he became chief mechanic, earning enough to move his family to Takamatsu. His career path stood in stark contrast to many returning soldiers trained only for combat who struggled with high unemployment, turning to day labor or the black market. Takeshi's vocational training at Camp McCoy had inadvertently prepared him for the exact skills Japan needed for reconstruction. In 1952, Takeshi married Keiko Tanaka, a school teacher whose father had been executed for war crimes related to POW camp administration in the Philippines. This shared, albeit contrasting, connection to the POW system fostered an unspoken understanding. They never discussed the specifics. Her shame and his complicated gratitude remained private, mirroring the war's moral complexities omitted from official narratives. They raised 3 children during Japan's post-war economic boom, witnessing its transformation into an industrial powerhouse. Takeshi's company expanded significantly in the 1960s, and his steady employment positioned him for management roles he could not have imagined as a wounded private on Saipan. Takeshi maintained no contact with Camp McCoy or the American medical personnel. Practical barriers like limited mail and distance existed, but psychological barriers were greater. How could he explain that their kindness had become an internal conflict, shattering wartime propaganda and leading to unutterable questions about his own government? Encounters with American servicemen during the occupation years evoked a complex mix of respect, resentment, gratitude, and anger towards the historical forces that led to such contradictions. In the 1970s, as Japan normalized relations with the US, memoirs of Japanese POWs emerged, most focused on harsh camps or the shock of capture, with few discussing medical care, perhaps to avoid undermining narratives of Japanese suffering. Takeshi read these, but never shared his own story, his silence being caution rather than shame, a recognition that his experience defied the convenient moral categories favored by post-war narratives. The broader legacy of Japanese POW medical treatment in American camps surfaced through historical research decades later. Camp McCoy's detailed medical records for its 3,000 Japanese prisoners, 1944-1946, revealed a mortality rate under 1%, vastly lower than the 40% suffered by American POWs in Japanese camps. American medical care, nutritional rehabilitation, surgery, therapy, dental work met or exceeded US servicemen standards. This disparity reflected institutional differences. The US largely honored the Geneva Convention, despite Japan's non-ratification. For Takeshi, this meant survival and rehabilitation. Post-war vocational programs at camps like McCoy, designed to keep prisoners occupied, provided unintended benefits. Thousands returned to Japan with invaluable skills in mechanics, agriculture, carpentry, and English, fueling reconstruction. This practical knowledge transfer, often unacknowledged in official histories, quietly influenced Japan's rapid economic recovery. Takeshi Yamamoto died in 1993, aged 72, having witnessed Japan's transformation. His obituary mentioned his military service and career, but omitted his POW experience. His family, respecting his reticence, kept it private. Only his grandchildren knew fragments. His comments about American kindness, his belief in good and evil on all sides, and his refusal to embrace simplified victimhood narratives. These private acknowledgments honored his truth without publicly challenging collective memories. The medical care Takeshi received at Camp McCoy, though extraordinary to him, was standard American military practice, applied regardless of enemy status. This ordinariness made it remarkable, demonstrating institutional humanity embedded in military medical procedures and Geneva Convention obligations. a stark contrast to the brutality of Japanese military medicine. This contrast profoundly influenced the post-war international order, particularly regarding POW treatment. The 1949 Geneva Conventions, updated in response to wartime experiences, strengthened protections based partly on successful models like McCoy. The care standards and work conditions Takeshi experienced became international law. American adherence, despite the enemy's violations, set a humanitarian precedent that transcended reciprocity, impacting millions of prisoners in subsequent conflicts. For the 5,000 Japanese POWs in Wisconsin, 1944 and 1946, the medical care they received subtly shaped post-war Japanese-American relations. The stark difference between their treatment and conditions in Japanese-run camps created cognitive dissonance, fostering a private understanding of American character that facilitated reconciliation and alliance. Men like Takeshi Yamamoto, saved by American military medicine, became quiet advocates for cooperation, their personal experiences contradicting militarist propaganda. Their influence, operating through family and culture rather than public testimony, was significant despite its invisibility to historians and policymakers.